Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Reverse the Verse, not live this week. Due to schedules and availabilities, we are pre-taping this a little bit earlier in the week to make sure that we have a show for you this Friday because we just launched the brand new Drake Interplanetary Corsair, which was a ship that got its first introduction to the Star Citizen community right here on this show back in 2017 in a You Pick the Next Drake Ship special. That's where we first met the Kraken, and the Kraken got its name. It's where we first met the Corsair, and the Corsair got its name, and where ultimately backers voted on the winning ship, the Vulture, which became the next Drake ship. But because you're picking the next ship and not the only ship we're making, we're finally caught up, and we're introducing finally the Drake Corsair. And joining us on the show this week, we have two esteemed Reverse the Verse guests who need no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway. John, tell us who you are and what you do for Star Citizen.
My name's John Crewe. I'm the Vehicle Pipeline Director.
Hi, John. Thanks for being here. Paul, what do you do for Star Citizen? Who are you?
Hello, I'm Paul. What do I do? Good question. I basically deal with a lot of the concept ships and also FPS weapons and ship weapons.
So between the two of you, you're pretty tied into the entire ship development process, which is why we have you on the show here with us this week. Thank you again so much for making the time out of your busy schedules to do this. Because we are not live like we normally are, and because at the time that we're filming this, the community doesn't know the Drake Corsair is coming. Surprise! We went and collected questions this week from the members of our community team, from the members of our player relations team, from the members of our platform team, basically all the other team members here, like Tyler, Ulf, Henry, Eric, Michael, all those guys who work at Christians, numerous, I don't want to leave anybody out, who work interpreting the community feedback and writing up the reports. We took the questions from them since they know the community pretty darn well, and I threw in a couple myself. So we're going to see if we can't get this going. I know we were in a hurry, so we're going to start right off the bat. John, when we first talked about this ship in that December 2017 You Pick the Next Drake ship, this was referred to as Drake's version of the Constellation. Is that still the case?
Yep, absolutely. That was part of the original design brief that we had at the time, even though it was just a little one-line or maybe two-line sentence that we had for the show that we did. But that was the goal then. That is still the aim now.
All right, so let's just get a couple of the heavy hitters that we always know come right off the bat. Why would somebody pick a Corsair over a Constellation?
Well, there's always the popular one that they just prefer the looks of one over the other. They both fulfill the same role. That is multi-crew, small multi-crew, small as in crew capacity, not size. Multi-crew explorer, carries some cargo, carries a vehicle. Ultimately, it comes down to picking between, do I like the RSI style? Do I like the ability to have two turrets, lots of missiles? Or do I want to have less missiles, more guns, more turrets? The expense of being slightly more fragile.
Okay. Now, the Constellation's got a number of variants. Each one comes with either a rover or a parasite craft like the Merlin, or sometimes, in some, like the case of the Phoenix, a rover and a parasite craft. Is that the same for the Drake Corsair?
I'm not 100% sure, actually. It has the capacity to take one. Like the Constellation, it takes the same space as the cargo, so it's cargo or rover. It's not like other ships where they're separate areas. Ultimately, it's not really a game design decision. It's more of the marketing and platform guys that ultimately put that together in the package. For me, I suspect it probably won't come on, but yeah, that's subject to change, as you'll probably find out now based on the page that's gone up yesterday.
Yeah, by the time this airs, the full promotion page will be up. If the options don't come with a rover, you'll be able to use an Ursa rover that you have on your own, or if you have a Lynx rover from the Phoenix, whatever, that can also fit in the cargo hold. What about the parasite craft? Does the Corsair have the ability to dock?
It does not have a docking port for a parasite craft like a Merlin. I'm sure enterprising people will cram one in there minus its wings or something like that. But it is designed to take an Ursa rover-sized vehicle in the back. So that's your upper size limit. It's not going to fit a tank. It's not going to fit anything that size. Grav-live vehicles like the Nox Dragonfly X1, those will fit in. You could probably
Get some buggies.
clown car up in there.
Yeah.
PTV will go in there. Cyclone probably, because I think it is in the same ballpark dimensions, but obviously the marketing meter is all based around the Ursa.
Right.
So if a ship takes an Ursa, anything else smaller than that will fit in it.
Well, that was my next question. What will fit? That's
What will-
the other big one. We already did that, so thank you. Paul, talk to me about Drake ships in general. What does it mean to be a Drake ship? Like, what kind of things go into this to make a ship instantly recognizable as Drake as opposed to RSI or Aegis?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Drake stuff is a lot more stripped back than, say, Aegis or, Origin is, in terms of sliding scale, you've got which way is the scale going? You've got Origin at the top end in terms of sleekness, and everything is hidden away. And pretty much Drake is at the bottom of the scale. Doesn't mean it's ugly. Like John was saying, everybody has a different preference. It has got personality, and do you know what? I've really, once we hit on this style, I really like this ship. I think we've come up with something pretty decent. But the interiors, it's more of akin to a sort of like of a Russian military craft. Everything's exposed, or it's bolted on. You've got your superstructure, and everything's easily accessible. You can just, you can get it, fix it, remove it, put it back on. You don't have to worry about chipping the paint or, some advanced polymer surface or any of this business. It's, it is quite military, and what you see is what you get.
And the RSI and Connie stuff is like that as well, but it's more of a refined civilian. Like it's a military thing that's had its edges slightly smoothed off, whereas Origin are really, you don't want to touch that sort of stuff. So.
Now, this is the 8th Drake ship so far that we've introduced to the Star Citizen universe, not counting the variants. And many of them in the past were the early ones were done by Jim Martin, the concept artist, and Jim Martin has returned to do the Corsair here. What were some of the, or if you can remember, what were some of the original design influences for the Corsair when we got started? Like, what did you want to achieve with the Corsair visually when we first started?
When we first started, it was a very different vision. This is we always talk about these difficult berths, don't we? And here we go again. Initially we were sort of pushing for, it was pitched more as a sort of big brother to the Cutlass.
It's like a super Cutlass, wasn't it?
So that was the direction we were heading in, and we did a lot of designs. And poor Jim, his pencil must have been worn out by the end of it. And so, we were going for that sort of classic 2 engines. It was more symmetrical, wide body, overall sort of feel. And as we progressed, it became clear that Chris didn't want to go in this direction. So we kind of did in the Drake universe, you kind of have two styles that you can go with. You've got the smaller like Cutlass style, and then you've got the Caterpillar asymmetrical, and he wanted to go more on that asymmetrical style, and so we started investigating on that, and then there was a couple of additional requirements that Chris wanted to see in terms of essentially nods to Corsair sailing ship. Again, he was sort of spitballing ideas, but it was, there was mentions of sails or fins, and so initially I was just like, what? Like we don't.
We went down the whole solar sail route at one point.
Yeah, we did.
Very different to what it looks like now.
Yeah, we did solar sails. We did. I put another artist onto it just to get a different vision. Sometimes you can sort of. Sometimes if we get a bit stuck, it's nice to get some fresh brains on it, and so we did a little more exploration with somebody else, and then we came back, and then so we got there in the end, and then it eventually got to the point where Jim had moved into 3D and we were sort of working with a kit as well. People will recognize quite a few of the elements that are on this ship. And then it was just a matter of me and Mike really just getting into the nuts and bolts, getting our hands in, and just sort of massaging the craft basically to get it to where it is now.
subscribers, members of the subscriber program, have access to a thing called the Subscriber Vault, where we often will upload the concepts not taken for a ship, and I would suspect that we'll do that in the coming weeks. So subscribers can keep an eye out for that to see some of the directions we explored. Let's talk about that asymmetry. I'm a big fan of asymmetry here. It's one of the reasons Drake is the manufacturer that's closest to my heart. Going back to the Herald, which lost its asymmetry, but the Caterpillar and stuff like that. This is very asymmetrical. How did you said it was Chris that brought that up? How did we get there?
So he was he wanted more asymmetry in terms of the Caterpillar was sort of asymmetrical from one axis, but when you try and factor into the design sails or fins, it suddenly gets really quite tricky. And then there's quite a bit of experimentation of just how to achieve what Chris wants with the asymmetrical feel, and it not look like a box. I didn't want to achieve the award of next ugliest ship in Star Citizen that I've made. I've got the gold already. I didn't want to go for the silver again. So it was just it was really just sort of I don't know. It's kind of one of the things that once we dealt with the body, and then the main wing, really to balance it, then we went vertical. So we've got this sort of essentially Y wing.
It's always tricky from a design side and from the flight handling side when asymmetry comes up, because we have a lot of old ships in the game that are very asymmetrical, and they cause us problems to this day.
Yeah.
Now, so whenever we come up with new asymmetrical ones, we try and visually make it look asymmetrical, but if you really drill down into it, a lot of the key components like the thrusters are symmetrical. We did the same with the Mercury Star Runner. That is essentially a symmetrical ship from design setup point of view. It's just the hull that gives it that asymmetry. The thrusters are evenly matched all the way around it. Yeah. And the same on this. Really, the asymmetry from a gameplay impact point of view is going to be those wings, and that's really only going to have some impact in atmospheric flight, and they're not wild enough to throw things off, because obviously you've got just one horizontal wing and then the two Y ones out the other side. The thrusters remain symmetrical, and the main engines are just going to power through any torquing that's going to be trying to throw it off.
Gotcha. That was actually my next question for you, John. Was how this wing configuration is going to play out in atmospheric flight. It's obviously at one point we want the ability to trigger a manual state change between the wings out and the wings up. Will the ship do it? I mean, obviously until we build it and we implement it, it's going to be hard to know 100%. But do we anticipate the ship will be able to operate in atmosphere in both configurations?
I don't see why it wouldn't be able to. One of them will be better than the other, but it's not going to be like some ships where you are forced into having to do it one style because of other knock-ons. Like the landing gear isn't tied to the wing shape at all, to my knowledge. It's all comes out the body, so it doesn't matter what you do with the wings. It's purely going to be affecting the drag simulation. And as we're finding with Reliant now, the Reliant's a different case because it has the thrusters on the movable part. So that does change from being very yaw happy to very pitch happy, depending on what flight state you're in. That's nothing to do with the orientation of the wing, and the drag from it is purely from the thrusters, which this doesn't have. So yes, it will have some impact, but no, it shouldn't be to the point where if you look at it, you think you're going to be flying around in a left or right hand circle in atmosphere.
Right, and if it can successfully maneuver enough in atmosphere to land in both wing configurations, I'm going to guess that if those wings get destroyed, you're not completely SOL either.
Yeah, there's no thrusters on there that they can get ripped off, and you're.
Now, we get a lot of stats questions often. The stats are going to be available on the website, but just to get them out there for this conversation so we can go forward. What can you tell us about the stats? What's our SCU like? What's our speed like? What are we looking at?
SCU wise, 72. Very similar, almost identical to the Connie. Again, it's rover or cargo. If you put a smaller vehicle in there, you get some of the cargo space back. Component wise, it's medium items pretty much across the board. Very similar layout to our other ships, so 1s and 2s of everything. There's no wild card options like the Prospector with a one size bigger power plant, or Sabres with 3 shields. It's very traditional 1s and 2s. Weapon wise, there's 2 man turrets, I believe. They're on the sides. So unlike the Connie, which is top and bottom and pretty much 360, these are 2 sideways ones that obviously cannot do 360 because there's a ship in the way.
But they're also limited to a 90-degree.
Yeah, again, a very
fire
sailing ship style nod.
Yeah.
There is a remote turret on the back to cover that back. So you've got the turrets. Where's the camera? If ship's pointing this way, you've got the turrets to cover the side angles. You've got the remote turret on the back, and then you've got 4 size 4 hard points around the cockpit, I believe. And then some on one wing.
2 wings.
2 wings.
They're
on the Ys, aren't they?
Yep.
So you've got, as the pilot, you've got a lot of forward-facing firepower, but once that is out of your view cone, you have to then rely on your turrets. So you've got 3 turrets, one more than the Constellation. It's got less missiles than Constellation. The Constellation's packing, I don't know how many lots, like 50, whereas this is much more restricted. It's like 8 or so. Depends how you configure your missile racks, which the Constellation can't do because it's all bespoke missile racks, whereas this, you could put one single large missile on each hardpoint, or you could get the octo racks and have 8 of the smaller size.
Gotcha. So more customizable.
It's more customizable, more guns, less armor.
This is a multi-crew ship. Like the Constellation was our original multi-crew ship. Our test bed for that. Obviously, multi-crew ships at this scale can be operated alone, but they're designed and intended to be played with your friends. Talk to me a little bit about what you envision the multi-crew gameplay of a Corsair to be like.
So the Corsair is all about going out and having fun with a group of friends. Ideally, if you don't have anyone to play with, like I know you always moan about that you're there playing by yourself.
Thanks.
You can always be able to hire an NPC crew. But really, it's you have your pilot, that you've got your gunners there to defend you, and when they're not doing that, they'll be doing the whole scanning and engineering side of running the ship. It's designed to stay away from base for a fair amount of time, which obviously means you're going to have supplies and managing of your systems in the ship, so repairing and keeping on top of wear and misfires and any items that break during your transit. You've got to deal with those, as well as just going exploring. Take that rover out and go explore some unknown planets.
Yeah, find some caves.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of ships are. We talk a lot about how some ships are self-sustaining and meant to be operate out on their own, and some ships are designed to work in tandem with other ships. Where does the Corsair fall in that? Is this something we see a small crew can go out there and hold their own on their own?
Yeah, like the ships in this sort of category, it's those 1 to 4 people going out for a medium-term expedition. It's got everything you need on board. You've got your own little living quarters. It's got a shared galley relaxation area. It's got space for supplies in the cargo hold and spares. It's not going to be that long-term duration like the Carrack, where it has all the bells and whistles that you can do there. But it's also not going to be as short-term as sort of some of the the smaller explorers like the Terrapin, where yes, it can go out for an extended period of time, but ultimately it's a one-person ship. There's only so much you can cover with one person, which is where these come in. The Cutlass is probably the next logical downgrade, I guess, from this. It's got space for 2 people. It's got 2 beds, fine, but it doesn't really have the onboard living accommodation to sustain them. It's got no toilet, which everyone always complains about. There's only so long you can go without the toilet.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Ostensibly, this is an exploration ship. Like the Constellation, this is Drake's version of an exploration ship. When I look at when I look at it though, and I see the remote turret and the 4 facing gun web hard points and the ordnance and whatever, it seems like it's a bit loaded for bear. Is this accurate? It's a pretty capable fighter, you think?
It's a very Drake thing. Ostensibly, they're a nice public company that doing good things.
But yeah, it's fully loaded.
But yeah, it can handle itself. Like the Cutlass, it was a militia patrol ship in the lore, but it gets used for more nefarious purposes. Same for the Caterpillar. It's a cargo ship. It's got a lot of guns and turrets on it. And I'm not sure the cargo it carries all the time is always what it's supposed to be carrying, but that seems to be what Drake does.
All right. So it's got a pretty hefty offensive footprint. Let's talk about defense. A lot of folks in the community sometimes talk about how Drake ships, maybe like the Buccaneer, aren't the most durable ships out there. And considering that with its proper wing configuration, this thing is going to present quite a large cross section here. Let's talk about its defensive capabilities. How's this thing going to do in surviving a fight?
Like other Drake ships, it is not as durable as some of its competitors. That's sort of the trade-off you get with all this extra armaments is you suffer in the durability stakes. Like we talked about earlier, the thrusters aren't really integral to the wings, so they can come off, and they're probably going to be the first things that come off from missiles and shots. It's not going to impact you too much. It has got those turrets, so teamwork is going to be key there to shaking off a few fighters. Or like we've talked about for turrets in general, in the future you'll be able to equip a blade on your computer item that will allow you to sort of turn them into a auto or AI turret. So if you don't want to, obviously there's 4 crew, 3 turrets to operate and a pilot. That's everyone doing that. There's no one left to run engineering or manage the shields. So you can swap out some of your computer capacity to automate one of those. Brings back that person to help move the shield power around, do the shield hardening.
Let's talk a little bit more about those turrets before we move inside, because I got a couple questions for Paul about the interiors here. The turrets, I know they can cover your sides. Can they swing all the way forward to be forward firing? What's their arc like?
No, they're about 90 degrees, aren't they? They can't. They're not like the Hammerhead where they're on a little gimbal that pops them out and then can rotate 90 degrees forwards. They are recessed in, so they're a bit more protected than the Hammerhead ones. Also means people can't really sneak behind. Like on the Hammerheads, once those turrets go out, you leave the doorway to the ship open. I've seen people sneak back into ships like that. That's not going to be a thing on this, but you lose that forward facing. I think there's more than enough guns pointing forwards on this. So really, this covers from like 20 degrees off the bore sight to 100 and something.
Great, and that's only that only really like affects an alpha strike in combat with moving so long. It should be easier to bring a target to bear. And then for the turrets, you mentioned the computer blades being able to slave them to computer control. Is that possible for both turrets? Basically, turning can we do that to the remote turret and the side turrets? Can we make them all?
Yep. You may not have enough computer capacity to do them all at the same time, but there's nothing to stop the individual turrets being done like that. Okay. It really comes down to, obviously, it's not in game, so I don't have the exact numbers on how many slots each computer blade has, or how many slots each computer has, how many blades it will take to automate each computer. But like we've said on previous ships, quite often there is not enough capacity to do everything all at once. We want to promote those choices of, if you want to fill your computer bank with AI turret blades, you're losing out on some other important functionality, and you have to pick which you deem to be more important.
All right, Paul, we talk a lot on ATV and RTV and calling all devs and whatnot about shared assets and resources between ships. It's not just for efficiency's sake so that we can get more things on screen at a time. It also is about building a personality for each individual manufacturer. Tell me about what we were able to use from other Drake ships and what we've added to the Drake lineup with this.
That's a good question. I mean, predominantly in terms of kits, this is using the Caterpillar.
There's a lot of Caterpillar in it.
Yeah, a lot of the sort of superstructure, the ribbing, the vertical ribbing. It's, I think in terms of, how well this is developed in terms of a concept, there's still a way to go. We've kind of got the sort of first read, what I'd call the basic Drake architecture in there. But there's still a lot of room for development so in terms of when we're making this stuff, I'll give Jim a kit of parts, and so it's it's fairly limited in terms of what I give him. It's just enough to get the overall vibe of the ship right. We borrowed obviously from the kit from the mess hall and the sort of suspended monitors and some of the bunk room stuff. So it's quite limited at the moment. We've obviously borrowed from the pilot's chair, co-pilot's chair, that sort of stuff. And so there's enough there to give people the feel of what will be coming. But ultimately, I think before the ship goes into production, we'll probably do an additional pass where we sort of expand it out a little further. I mean, the thing is, it depends on who builds it. I mean, if it's going to like Elwin and his team, I think they built the Caterpillar anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a lot simpler. There's a lot more free reign. If it's coming to a brand new team where it's full of juniors, then we'll probably spend a bit more time working out all the exact areas.
Gotcha. How do we enter the ship? I know on ATV we talked about, obviously you can see the rear ramp and you can get in through the rear, but that rover seemed pretty snug in there. Like you wouldn't be able to get around the rover if you plug the rover in there. Is there a second entry to the Corsair like the Constellation has? Yep.
So just covering your first point, it is a little snug at the moment if you look at the concept. We'll fix that when it goes into production.
Yeah, if it's too tight as it is, then we can bring those walls out.
I think it's because we went to a sort of because the incline and the sort of narrow at the top, and then with that additional geometry of the circular sort of engine mounts, everything has kind of crept in a bit. But we'll definitely fix that so there's enough space for people to easily get past. There's nothing more annoying than having to shimmy past your vehicle. And then the other Crewe entrance is basically essentially in between the two turrets. So it's just a standard vertical lift. Jump on there, up you go. And it's fully enclosed, so you're not venting your whole ship if there's a problem. So you can turn, when you come in, turn left, you go down to the crew. Turn right, you go into the cockpit.
Yeah. So we're inside now. Give me a rundown of what we can expect inside the ship. We saw a little bit of it on ATV yesterday, but this is Drake. It's minimalist. They don't always put in a lot of the amenities. So what can we expect in the interiors, and what are we going to be missing?
I mean, it's the basics for living.
Spartan.
It is Spartan. So you've got your bed per crew member. The captain does have his own separate quarters. They are super sparse at the moment, but we'll be looking to sort of expand or develop that area. Let's say it may not get much bigger, but you've got your dedicated area. You've got your usual of your combo toilet, shower, sink.
Star Citizen favourite.
Yeah, it does work really well in terms of space saving. And then your food machines, and then sort of communal dining area and sort of bench style seating. So it's more.
That's about it for the crew. Like, it's not like other ships where they have a separate rec room with a pool table and ice hockey and.
Yeah, maybe on the suspended monitors we've got some kind of some kind of game system hooked up to there. Who knows? Whatever we want to do. And then as you progress further through, you sort of get to this, essentially the component, like the guts of the ship, the components. And again, that's very sort of skeletal. Basically, you've got superstructure that's sort of coming through the roof, going down vertically and then back onto the floor. And then it's essentially an open server rack almost. So it was just one thing that I just wanted to add. There was just a bit of a visual hook essentially for the ship. So when you come through from either direction, you come into this room, it's octagonal. Again, sort of keeping with the basic Drake feel. They're not spending money on curved beams or anything. It's just straight I-beams kind of thing, and they're just cut together. And then there's plenty of space also for just little rooms off. So either for additional storage or, if you're maybe want some illicit goods. And there should be in theory, we would, when I was talking to Jim about it, we were going to put in a vent system as well. So there was additional gameplay and more interest to the ship. We didn't actually fit that in the time that we had, but there is space for it. So expect that when it goes to the dev team, we'll put in this system of vents.
Some truly secret hidey holes that aren't known about in advance.
All right.
And then of course your cargo room. So it's pretty Spartan, but everything you need, I think.
The hexagonal component room. Are we? It's interesting to me because it's in some ships, the components seem like they're going to be pretty spread out. Like when the ship's on fire and you figure out which component needs to be replaced, how well your ship is going to come into play, going to knowing where that component is in your ship. This to me, it looks like this is a one big central room, like in the core of the ship, that houses most, if not all, of the components. Am I reading that right?
It's the majority. I mean, we haven't fully spec'd out exactly what's in there. I knew that we had a lot of space in this ship anyway, so there's still some flexibility in what's going to go in there. But yeah, it's
going to be a warm room when they generate heat.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good example of utilitarian design. Like all the components are there in a central place at the core of the ship where they're the most protected. It was a cool design feature that I saw when we were talking about this. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up, but that's what I was looking. One of the things I was looking forward to.
I hope so, because it was kind of like it was my idea. So it's going to go in, right? I'm going to force it in. Right. No, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's something I would like to see us have a shot at.
I don't see why it wouldn't happen in the production of it. Like you say, there is more than enough space for other components in there, but the majority of them are going to go in that space.
Yeah, and it's going to give us, you're bringing up, just mentioning about the temperature and stuff for that room. That's going to give us an additional visual hook, so we can put big, essentially AC units or vents, fill it out all above you, so we can have steam or whatever it is, venting coming down from the ceiling. So we're going to have a really atmospheric feel. Yeah,
the big central component room, and then right behind it, the cargo area where you essentially ideally be storing many of your spare components. I think it seems very efficient as far as managing the ship in a crisis situation. Everything is right there where you're going to need it. It seems cool to me. On the exterior, I think it's the starboard wing. I don't have a picture. I should have had a picture. I think it's the starboard wing, has a big pointy prong thing.
Yeah.
Not unlike the prongs at the front of a caterpillar. Does that have an enumerated gameplay function, or is that a rule of cool?
It is 100% not a gun. Before anyone thinks it's a gun.
In its most basic, it was a visual element to balance out the ship. It works well. We treated it as a sensor, and its styling is very similar to the caterpillar. But yeah, a lot of people are thinking it's a gun. It does look like a gun, but it's not a gun. But will it? I guess I don't know. John can speak for this. Whether we can factor in some gameplay, I don't know.
Possibly. A majority of the scanning and radar stuff comes from the actual components themselves in the ship. So stuff like that. It's not like the Reliant variants with their turret camera things on the end of the wings. Possibly, but it's not intended for anything actual gameplay wise. It's a cool looking thing on the end.
Gotcha. You mentioned the scanning the radar. On the promotion page, there's a mention of a state-of-the-art sensor suite or scanning suite, something like that. I was surprised to see the phrase state-of-the-art applied to anything Drake related. Talk to me about.
So was I.
Let's talk about what that scanning suite actually entails, or what we think it might well entail.
It's more like functionality-wise, it's like any other ship. It's got a scanner. It can scan with it. The component that comes with the ship is just better than what you'd get run-of-the-mill ships, which for Drake is probably state-of-the-art. Is something fractionally better than average. Going to upset a lot of Drake fans now.
I don't know. I could see Drake. I could see Drake splurging for something like a better scanner for if it helps you know what other people or what's in other people's cargo holds.
Scanning has many uses in our game, not all for good.
Yes, and scanners are very important to exploration gameplay, and you should only be using the Corsair for your certified exploration gameplay. And
absolutely,
the scanners wouldn't be used for any other purposes. Okay. Docking collar. On the exterior, there are a number of what look like circular things. I'm sure one of those is probably the lift that Paul was talking about earlier. Does this ship have a docking collar? Or docking port or docking collar?
I'm pretty sure we specified no.
Yeah, it's not got one on there.
Okay.
It's just got it's got some circles on the on the hull. I think there's one on the top.
Yeah, there's one on top, but it's not lined up with anything important. It's just a detail. You can get into it multiple ways in EVA, and it's not of a size in our lineup of ships where it becomes problematic to spawn at locations. It's a relatively compact for what it is. The wings fold up to bring it into metrics for landing zones and hangars. So there's more than enough places where it can be naturally spawned without the need for being attached to docking collars. It's an exploration ship. You probably shouldn't be docking to other ships because that's generally not good for its behavior. If you're docking to another ship, it's probably you're exploring it in a hostile way.
All right, fair enough. Let's get a little esoteric here. The Constellation has a number of variants. We know this is Drake's version of the Constellation. Has there been any discussion about potential Corsair variants? Anything we're ready to talk about?
No, we haven't really discussed any.
We just did color paint variations,
paint options.
I must have, sometimes there was one particular color that I was under the impression that we were delivering it in, and it must have done like 12, 14 different variations just to try and get this color scheme to work. But then it was nixed at the end. So
just go back to what we had to start with.
But it looks cool. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff we can do with this ship. So it looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, there isn't a huge amount of variation you could do internally and gameplay wise with the ship. It's not like the Constellation variants, the Aquila has some bolt-on pieces to make it better, which aren't particularly translatable to this. The Phoenix is almost a new ship for the majority of the interior, and the Taurus has significant geometry changes to it to have the extra cargo, whereas this ship, if you take anything out of it to replace it with anything else, you sort of lose a huge amount of functionality of the ship. The back cargo bay and the component bay are almost one integral part of the ship, and all that leaves is where the crew is. And if you get rid of that to change it to something else, there's nothing left to the ship.
Yeah, it's the flip side of being very purpose-driven and utilitarian. It's when you design a ship from top to bottom with only what it's supposed to do and the room to do it, it's hard to iterate on that. Although I think it would be hilarious if Drake issued a luxury version of a Corsair that has like dangling dice, and that's like the only change, whatever, and it's luxury, and they charge $300.
Put a fan in the cockpit.
Sounds like ship customization to me.
Coming soon. Let's see, what else we got? Yeah, soon TM. Okay, so it's a no variance. Besides variance, we got player-facing modularity comes into play in a lot of ships. Any player-facing modularity plan for the Corsair? Medical facilities, escape pods, ejector seats.
Nothing planned. A lot of people think we try and we're on some secret mission to try and remove modularity from the game. That's not the case. It's just some ships we build it in from the ground up. Others we don't. If every ship was modular, then it sort of ruins a lot of the fun of the ships. They all become very samey. So we have some ships that are modular. We'll have some ships in the future that are modular. But also we have a lot that have a dedicated role or focus because it just makes them more interesting.
So any escape pods on this? Forget the player modularity. I didn't ask this before.
Classic Drake styling.
Okay.
Get out of the ship however you can. We're not helping you.
Yeah.
All right. Recently on the Kraken, we had some Drake synergies. Like the Kraken has those specific Dragonfly hangars as opposed to the other hangars it has. Any particular Drake synergies involved with the Kraken or with the Corsair?
That's a good idea.
Yeah. There's nothing. Like it's not designed. It's too big to naturally land on the Kraken. You can, like people have theorized with the Caterpillar, you can slam it down on the two top pads, but it's not a natural storing or spawning location. It's simply too big. Yes, you could land it there and use it, but it's not designed to go on there.
Gotcha. So your mileage may vary as far as landing it on a Kraken.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be tricky. It's what, 55 meters long. That's getting on a bit.
We're just about out of time. Paul, what about we're introducing our 8th Drake ship. What about this ship excites you most about adding it to the Star Citizen pantheon of 160 some odd ships at this point?
That's a good question. I think I don't know. Mine it's really personal for me. I think it's just I'm really happy about how the ship turned out, and because I find the asymmetrical stuff the hardest to tackle. These ships are not easy anyway, but then you throw in asymmetry, and it's a whole different ball of wax. Also working with new concept artists. So for me, it's a bigger thing for me in terms of, we've delivered something that I'm really happy with in terms of shape and silhouette. We've obviously done the promo images, and I'm falling for my own promo. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm going to be in the stars. I'm just going to be sailing away with my crew. I guess I've fallen for the sort of the romance of the Drake adventure.
Yeah, I will say I've known Jim Martin for a while now. he makes ships that don't necessarily look like anything else. It's definitely, people are going to see, when people see a Drake ship, you know it's a Drake ship right off the bat. And when they see a Cutlass, or when they see a Corsair rather, they're going to know they're looking at a Corsair immediately.
Yeah.
Yep. And so then we're, job done. We want people to be able to look at these ships and go, right, that's a Drake, and then even better if they go, that's a Drake Corsair.
John, same question to you before we let you go. Why are we adding this to Star Citizen? What are we looking? What does this add to Star Citizen as a whole?
I think it adds a really nice bit of variety to an often overlooked segment of our ship. A lot of people always get super excited for very niche gameplay ships, something that does a specific career, or it's a starter in that career, or it's the end game in that career. But in reality, everyone's going to start with their starter ships, and then these ships are where I see the average player spending the majority of their time in game. Things like the Cutlass, the Connie, the Freelancer, the Corsair, that's where in my mind, people are going to be putting the hundreds of hours in are on those ships. Those are your traditional solid ships to do a little bit of everything in. And then you can go off to the more exotic, fancy ships, and just having more variety in that area is exciting for me, because it gives everyone a chance to express what they want their little ship to be. They've got all the choice in there. So it may not be the most amazing ship in terms of one gameplay aspect. It might not bring anything brand new to the table, but those are sort of the core of the game.
I think I get to there are people I've heard of who own like more than one car. I'm not one of those people, and they always refer to one as their everyday driver. They have these other cars that are good for specific events and specific types of driving, specific types of operation, but then they have the everyday driver, the thing they use to get to and fro. And I think the Corsair is another great example of that kind of ship for Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you. Thank you so much for making time out of your schedule. This is Wednesday. I know we don't usually do this on a Wednesday, but obviously we were not available for tomorrow or Friday, and we really wanted to do a show on the Drake Corsair because it's a ship I think the community is going to have a lot of questions on. So thank you for making special time in your schedule to be here, and I release you from your duties. And for everybody watching at home or at work or in the car, if you're Captain Richard, we'll see you next week, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.